College Football Hall of Fame. It is the ideal time of year. Fall is my favorite time of the year. It's in the South, here at the College Football Hall of Fame. I don't think there's much more fitting than really describing fall through college football, Julie.
Yeah, it was really fun to walk into this venue this morning and feel all the energy and think about college football starting soon. And for me, even more than college football, just fall in general and getting to enjoy that gorgeous time of year here in the Southeast.
Now, you're a Wisconsin fan. You went to University of Wisconsin. I'm a Baylor fan. Not a lot of Baylor stuff here at the College Football Hall of Fame.
Not a lot of Wisconsin stuff here either. I was like walking through, I went through the gift shop this morning. I was walking through the Big Ten section and I'm like, what's going on? It was only Michigan and Ohio State stuff.
So someone told me earlier, one of our guests, Tony Royals, said that the original College Football Hall of Fame was in South Bend, Indiana, which is Notre Dame country.
Yeah.
So they moved it to Atlanta. Kind of fits ideal. This is a beautiful. What's that?
They did have Notre Dame stuff down there.
This is a beautiful location. It's a beautiful day here in Atlanta. So it's hot Atlanta. It has been hot. It's cooled off a bit. But we've got a great packed show. We're going to bring in our guests that are from Atlanta. Atlanta is one of the major freight cities and major freight corridors. And we're going to feature all that there is in Atlanta. But we've got a fantastic lineup. Got Clayton Griffin, the president of OTR, big finance company that serves our industry. We have Tony Broyles. He's the director of business development, Overdrive. We have Ed Elkins, the executive vice president and chief commercial officer at Norfolk Southern. We like the railroads here at FreightWaves Today. And we have Brian Dunn at Americold. He runs the facilities and engineering and head of sustainability. So really packed show.
Yeah.
We've got the trains, we've got the payments, we've got the freight.
Energy, yeah.
And we've got it all. Stay tuned.
Let's get into the headlines.
Federal agents at the U.S.-Mexico border have intercepted a massive drug shipment disguised as fresh produce. U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers at the Far International Bridge in Texas seized nearly $15 million worth of methamphetamine hidden inside a commercial celery load. Using non-intrusive imaging equipment, inspectors uncovered 721 packages containing more than 1,600 pounds of meth. The tractor-trailer was seized, and Homeland Security Investigations is currently leading an investigation into the smuggling attempt. After more than a century in business, Pacific Northwest regional carrier TP Freight Lines has abruptly suspended operations. According to Teamsters Joint Council 37, employees were unexpectedly told not to report to work, with the company missing payroll and leaving workers without health insurance. The union blames the shutdown of the Oregon-based carrier on severe operational and financial mismanagement, following a recent ownership change. TP Freight joins a growing list of regional LTL carriers forced to close in recent months. U.S. rail freight volume is surging, driven by a massive boost in domestic metal production. According to the latest data from the Association of American Railroads, total rail traffic rose 2.5% year over year. Metallic minerals and ores led the charge, soaring over 19% as tariffs on foreign imports drove demand toward domestic steel mills. Intermodal traffic also saw steady gains, bringing total rail volume up more than 3% for the year so far.
So, Julie, you know, again, another story about a major freight crime, this time drug trafficking. The Highway Patrol seizing $15 million in a meth.
Border Patrol, yeah. $15 million disguised as produce in the middle of a load of celery.
I mean, but that seems like one of those old classic things that, I mean, that's how the drug trafficking organizations have always brought in drugs, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's been produce always lately. It was cucumbers for a while, we talked about a few weeks ago. Now it's
I think it's because it's like,
that's just
you can put it in there and it like, I don't know. But you always watch these like shows at the airport security people.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember what the show's called. Southern Lifetime or A&E or something, but it's like you watch them and they're bringing things in, like airport I don't know what's called. Also, rail volumes are up. We've talked about that. That's just a sign of how strong the industrial economy is.
Yeah, the most interesting thing I found about that is they linked it really to domestic metal production. So carload traffic is up 2.5% year over year. Tariffs are driving demand towards domestic steel production, which is driving more demand for those metal ores and all of those. So carloads are up. But then intermodal traffic across the board is also rising. So when you add the intermodal traffic with the carload traffic, they're up 3%. This year. So
I mean, intermodal taking advantage of the 34% discount between truck and rail, big significant savings. But I always am encouraged when we see that bulk volume increases, the substantial amount of bulk freight that's moving across the rails. We're going to get into that later today. We have Norfolk Southern's Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer is going to tell us all about the railroads, based here in Atlanta. Although they got a big merger and a big marriage. So I think Omaha might be the future for their
I don't know. Ooh, that would be tough.
You think so? You're not an Omaha fan?
It's so hot in the summer. It's so cold.
You're not a fan of Omaha?
I mean, I wouldn't mind visiting there, but I don't know that
I
listen,
think
we moved
Omaha.
around a lot. I could live wherever you have to live. Like, I've realized that from moving around as I was growing up. But it wouldn't be somewhere that I would choose over the Southeast. I just wouldn't choose Omaha.
Yeah, and you're talking about the heat. Come on, Jill.
It's like 90 degrees in Omaha in the winter and in the summer and dead still, and it's super cold in the winter.
I'm kind of a fan of Omaha. I have spent some time in Omaha. I think it's like an undiscovered gem. It doesn't get the love, but it's actually a really nice city.
People would say the same about Chattanooga, right? That it's hot in the summer.
Well, it is hot in the
like undiscovered gem.
Yeah, it's true. But we'll see what happens with the merger. There's a lot of conversations. As we talked yesterday on the show, STB is reviewing the application. I think we're expecting fall of 2027. I do think the official word is they're going to move their headquarters to Omaha, and it will be Union Pacific. So we'll see.
So speaking of the Southeast in Atlanta, Clayton Griffin, president of OTR Solutions, is here joining us.
By the way, you have at the College Football Hall of Fame. There's no more fitting than to I almost. So I
had to welcome you guys to Atlanta. I mean, UGA has pretty much run the city for the last several years with the SEC Championship being hosted here. So figured I would welcome you to the city, and we got a beautiful day.
Georgia,
Yeah, I did. I went to University of Georgia. I started at OTR right after I graduated. So
you've had one job.
I've had one career. I've had many jobs. I've had one career at OTR. Yeah.
So you guys have built an amazing business. You're on the finance side of the overall freight market. What exactly drew you to OTR? Were you just a kid getting out of school and were like,
yeah, it was kind of happenstance that I stumbled across OTR, but it was really the people. I was finance at Georgia, and so there was a finance aspect to the business. Obviously, there still certainly is today. But it was really the people and the opportunity to work alongside. So a lot of the same people that I interviewed with and spoke with at my first day at OTR are still there, and we're still kind of rocking and rolling today.
And then you guys are in the top 3 of factoring companies. You continue to branch out your operations and technology services to other things.
Yep.
Is it just a point where there's almost like the growth has to go from things other than factoring?
No, I think there's plenty of growth still in kind of our core business. You know, for instance, we'll be up 60% in the core business year over year, 2026 compared to 2020.
In factoring. Now, how much of that is load
customer
rate
growth versus rate growth?
That's a great question. So 37%, we will grow invoice count by roughly 35-ish%, obviously depending on how the rest of the year goes. But we're continuing. What's interesting about our business, to your point, Craig, is that we're building it to try to provide value to multiple parts of the ecosystem. And so what we've determined is that when we're good partners to brokers, and we can build relationships and make those relationships stronger, it benefits our carrier customers. And so OTR Select, which is a product we launched, is one of the things that we have done in that realm, but ultimately the vast majority of our 23,000 carriers that are factoring with us are running brokered freight. And so the more we can get to know, we work with somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 brokers every year. That is very top heavy, as we know, right? A lot of the top 10, top 50 command a lot of the freight volume. And so going to them and trying to figure out a way, how can we benefit your brokerage operation by consolidating a lot of the activity that it's much easier to work with OTR than it is to work with 20,000 independent motor carriers. And then if we can go to the motor carriers and say, we can market your capacity to the brokerage community, which are the vast majority of the people who you're finding freight from, it benefits them as well. So we're in kind of a unique position. I think a lot of, logistics, it's billed in a lot of cases as kind of a zero-sum game. You have to have a winner and you have to have a loser, right? If a broker gets paid or if a broker finds a truck for cheaper, then the carrier might be losing. We're really trying to find the areas where we can provide value either on the cost side of the equation or to provide more capacity opportunities and options to the brokerage community. So,
Clayton, what you've described in terms of load matching sounds a lot like a load board. Is that something you guys are planning to do or are doing?
Yeah, today I'll answer it by saying we're going to follow what our customers are asking us, the value that our customers are asking us to provide. And so it took us a very long time to feel like we could truly provide value, where we got into the scale, 23,000-ish carriers, 60 or 70,000 trucks in the network, to say it is worth a broker's time to look at our capacity and it really make an impact on how they're going to source carriers to run their freight. A lot of those brokers are now coming to us and saying, well, how do I get my freight in front of your carriers? And so we're looking at it and asking ourselves, what is the most sensible way for us to potentially approach that problem? Are there platforms that we should partner with? Should we go out and build some of that functionality ourselves? But right now, I think everybody knows that there is a better way to find capacity for the brokerage community.
But you never really directly answered my question.
Yep.
Whether or not you guys are moving into load matching. You had a partnership with DAT that ended up in litigation.
Yep.
We reported on that. Suspiciously, after you guys settled it, all of a sudden OTR became a sponsor of the UGA thing. Was it? I know you can't talk to it, but I got to say, it looked like that might have been a good use of Roper's money. I'm very pro that. By the way.
Listen, there's an opportunity. I think obviously I love the University of Georgia, and so if we're going to sponsor an athletic program, I would love for it to be UGA. I think motor carriers are big football fans. Freight brokers are certainly very big football fans, and UGA is a winning program, and so we like to think of ourselves as aligning ourselves with winning programs.
Okay, so let's go back to this load matching concept.
Yep.
It's a really crowded space. There have been thousands of attempts, and the history of the internet.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's hard. I think building a network and a marketplace business is hard, because what you have to have in order to have a marketplace business is you have to have both supply and demand. It's very hard to have a successful marketplace business if you only have demand and people are, for instance, posting their freight, but they're not getting any carriers that want to actually run that freight. Or if you have a bunch of carriers and you have captive carrier eyeballs, but you don't necessarily have the demand or the freight side of the equation. I think we get feedback. One of the early questions we used to say early days OTR, that trucking companies don't start a trucking company to factor their freight, right? They start a trucking company to run freight and to make money. And so it is certainly a question we get when we're onboarding carriers into our platform. Hey, are there any ways that you can help me find freight? And traditionally, we've done everything we could to point them in the direction of, brokerage partners who we have really good relationships with, that we know will load, a particular carrier of their tenure or their type or their equipment type. If somebody has a bunch of drive-in or a bunch of reefer freight or a bunch of, open deck freight. So we've tried to answer those questions in kind of an ad hoc way for our carriers over the years. But finding a way to do that is truly beneficial and gives the market the benefit of the carrier network that we have built, I think is interesting to us. Whether we do that ourselves or whether we're looking around and saying, hey, are there really good aggregators of demand that we could tap into? We feel like we have very captive carrier eyeballs. And we have an extraordinary level of trust with our carriers.
So DAT bought a factoring business out ago. It was small. It was a huge scale, not a major player, but I think their thesis was that they could take their distribution, their load board, and own more of the transaction flow.
Yep.
You guys are a large factoring business, and are now moving toward closer, whether or not you had declared it as a load board or matching business, certainly moving closer. You have Triumph, a competitor in the factoring business, another major factoring business that has partnered with the TFX exchange, which is FreightWaves. It just feels like the factoring businesses and the non-factoring businesses, there's this convergence happening where, and then look, Truck Stop's got a very large factoring business.
They do.
It's probably the most valuable part of their entire enterprise is in their factoring operation. So you've got these interesting parties that are doing factoring, load matching. Where does this all end up? Because ultimately you guys are fighting for share in your core businesses, but then also going after each other's core business. Is this just the direction that we should see all of these companies headed in?
You know, I can't speak for everybody else. I can say that we're always trying to find ways to deliver value to both sides of the ecosystem that we primarily engage with today. For the longest time, and it's still in our core kind of factory, the reviews and those types of things will speak to that. And so when our carriers are asking us questions, and we're going to try and find a way to answer those questions if we think that it's going to benefit their operation. So if the question is, do small and medium-sized carriers struggle to find reliable freight opportunities? Generally speaking, I think the vast majority of the industry would answer yes. And so we are looking around saying, well, can we be helpful in that endeavor to our clients? Is there information, for instance, about their historical tendencies, about the freight that they like to run, about the equipment that they're running, that will give us the opportunity to market their capacity to the brokerage community on their behalf? Because they simply don't have the means or the ability to do it themselves, right? A 5-trucker, a 10-trucker has no ability to go and market their capacity reliably and consistently to the brokerage community. The way they do that is by finding freight. If you think about how do you make a new SMB carrier relationship traditionally in our industry? What's the only real way? A broker posts a load, a horde of carriers call in about that load, somebody wins the freight. Maybe the brokerage rep says, hey, do you like to run any other types of freight? How many trucks do you have? What type of equipment do you have? What areas of the country do you like to have? They sort it in their CRM or whatever it may be, and then they maybe try to reload that carrier. And so there's no reliable way to make an SMB carrier relationship traditionally in our industry.
I talked to Dan Lewis extensively at the end of Convoy. And you know, as that business was sort of being sold, he told me that the real value of the load boards, traditional load boards, DAT and Truck Stop, is the relationship you don't have. For them, this was their business. Their model was using the load boards to source capacity and then put it into their closed marketplace. And if they could get the carrier to take at least 3 loads in their marketplace, they would never, essentially that carrier would become almost dependent upon Convoy, was sort of the thesis they had. So the load boards, in his mind, was really a sourcing unit for new carriers. What you're talking about is a little different, because you're talking about carriers that you have a financing relationship potentially, and brokers that you're doing some type of payment processing.
Maybe, but even, I mean, for instance, Select is not affiliated with the payment or the back office products. They stand alone. So like we can onboard somebody, a brokerage, for instance, and are doing this in a day. Because it's
so let's back up a bit. What exactly does OTR Select do right now?
So it takes all of the information around rates and capacity. So when we say capacity, it's let's say this is exactly what it does. You search an origin and a destination. It gives you historical spot rate carrier data, and it gives you carrier options that have run those lanes historically. And the really important part is that it only shows you carriers that have passed our underwriting standard and meet our qualification criteria. So as you can imagine, we'll do $8 billion in freight spend, carrier freight spend on the factoring side of the business this year. So we put our money where our mouth is as it relates to the validity of our carriers, right? We're paying them and in many cases instantly. So they have to be who they say they are. We're doing a bunch of underwriting.
About that vetting. So the carriers that are involved are pre-vetted, obviously, to have been able to be a part of your ecosystem.
Exactly.
What does that look like, and then what is the impact on potential fraud and liability for brokers then who are using that?
Yeah, I mean, we do really robust underwriting on the front end because it's a financial transaction that we're embarking on with our motor carriers. And so we're looking at all of the things that you guys report on, which is chameleon carriers and reincarnations, and is this person affiliated with a potential crime group? We run personal background checks on the individuals that are running with or are owners of the businesses, because our relationship is significantly longer than just one load or two loads. A brokerage, it's not really sensible for them to go and do that level of underwriting on a carrier that they're going to load once. Right, the CAC of acquiring that carrier into their market would be too high. And so they're unable to get that deep with the long tail of the carrier marketplace. We're very, very deep with our carriers. And so when you search an origin or destination, the only results you see, we don't publish any result from a carrier perspective that is not in our network, which means that you can't pay to access. We don't sell subscriptions to be, populated to the top of OTR Select. It's only by engaging and going through the very robust underwriting and continual monitoring.
And does that help from a fraud standpoint?
Yes.
It's a known, ultimately, the highest risk load is the party that you don't know. And that's the reason, we've talked about this extensively, we've reported on it, is that the open market load boards, DAT and Truck Stop, are losing postings because brokers are being told by shippers and just their own risk mitigation that they don't want to post in these open marketplaces because the risk profile is so significant.
You just don't know what you don't know. I think you nailed it. The highest risk is working with a carrier that you've never loaded before. And so the way we think about it is Select expands your known carrier network. You should look at these carriers as if they had run freight for you, because they're running freight for the rest of the industry. And so by tapping into thousands and tens of thousands of 2, 3, 5, 10 truck operations that are legitimate, that do a good job, that have been potentially running freight for 5 years, 10 years, which we have plenty of these types of players, you expand your known carrier network. You expand the number of capacity options that you can then use to, and then you make a business decision as a broker. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to bid more aggressively on RFPs? Are you more confident in your pricing from an RFP perspective? Do you have more confidence that you're going to find that you're going to have capacity if, for instance, your first or second carrier falls off? So that's really the primary thesis behind.
And do you see a world where, TFX Highway has come out and said that they will, I don't know the exact term Michael Kenny uses, maybe Julie knows this, but we're going to guarantee the load or something. I don't remember exactly. It's almost like they're ensuring.
Put a dollar amount guarantee behind
If that load is stolen or something, they're effectively backstopping. Again, I don't know the exact term they're using, so I want to be careful to over.
Yeah, I think they check certain boxes and they adhere to certain things.
Do you see a world where OTR would do the same?
I don't know. I will say I think we put our money where our mouth is already with the carrier relationship, because we are funding them on those.
Do you believe that the risk profile that you have in terms of being their bank and guaranteeing payment?
Yeah, literally a carrier uploads an invoice at 10 p.m. and we fund them at 10:02 with no human intervention.
And is it recourse or non-recourse?
It's non-recourse.
So just make sure that our audience knows what non-recourse means.
The vast majority of, certainly the SMB portion of our factoring portfolio, non-recourse means that if the broker doesn't pay for one reason or the other, we don't charge the invoice back to them. We don't come back to them and say, in 35 days, because the broker didn't pay, in 30 days, hey, you owe us $1,500.
And most factoring businesses are recourse. And
a lot of them are.
You sell the transaction, the load, the paper, or whatever you want to describe it, to a factoring business. They buy that paper, but then if the shipper doesn't pay or the broker doesn't pay, they're just going to come get that money from you, which always felt a little bit like, if I was a carrier, and having the money pulled out of my account? Because these are cash flow businesses.
Oh man, it's super disruptive. It's really, really disruptive. And so our COO, Grace Marr, who has been with the business since we were founded, has always been, we don't, even for our recourse, when you get up into kind of the larger fleets, you might deploy a recourse program selectively. But even for those, we've always put a very heavy emphasis on buying correctly on the front end of the transaction, because what you're effectively doing is preventing, a lot of other guys, they might be able to pay people fast, but they don't do the level of verification on the invoice. And so what happens is at 35 days, even if it's real, if you haven't delivered to the broker what they need to make payment at 30 days, then you haven't done your job. We feel you haven't done your job as their financing or factoring partner. And so to your point, Craig, about how we've gotten to where we've gotten, we put such an emphasis on the front end on making educated, informed, data-driven decisions that benefit our carriers and being able to make them faster and more accurately, that the data exhaust is really what's feeding Select. So it wasn't as if we woke up and said, hey, we want to go and build this platform and it's going to take us 5 years to get there. The document imaging technology, which is freight specific, is AI driven, and is the best in the industry, bar none, is what is feeding Select, which is a data product, right? And the only reason that the data is as good as it is because our factoring division relies on it to make the best decisions possible. And so to your other point, there's an alignment of incentives. We're aligned to make great decisions on the front end of the factoring transaction because we know that it will lead to fewer chargebacks and or fewer write-offs.
So who sees the chargeback? Let's say, you know, I have some small e-commerce businesses, and if the person says, hey, I didn't pay, that wasn't my...
Convoy's a good example. Convoy's a really good example. So Convoy, you know, basically overnight closed their doors, left a bunch of carriers with significant exposures, left a bunch of factoring companies with significant...
It was over $100 million, right?
And the vast majority of factors would have gone back and said, hey, this broker's out of business, they're bankrupt, we're going to take this money, whether it's, you know, maybe you have one load for $1,500, maybe you have... You know, Convoy was a significant portion of your freight that you ran, and it's 10 grand or 20 grand or 50 grand or $100,000. They're going to say, guys, we got to claw that money back from you because you're not recourse and this broker went bankrupt. We said, it's on us. And which is also, if you remember, why we were one of the first people to say.
I remember you guys cut them off, and I remember my phone blew up from, they're my friends, I won't out them. Who called and was very upset, and we were doing some fact checking and be like, I think this is, and I told the person on the other phone who's a Convoy executive, I was like, dude, I think you're not telling me the whole story here.
Yeah, and that's, once again, it's just an alignment of incentives. Our interests are aligned with our carriers and our brokers.
But you have to watch the credit risk of all these parties.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting because brokers, I don't remember before. What was that broker that suddenly shut down? Surge.
I don't remember. Before that, I think, there was one more out of Jacksonville.
There's a couple of small, there's historically usually a fraud or some kind of embezzlement involved, but I can't remember reporting big, high-scale brokers that just went out of business that were non-asset up until Surge would have been one, Convoy been another. And I just remember thinking this is a really different sort of level of bankruptcy and risk. But you guys have to monitor the risk and credit risk at all times.
Yeah, I mean, brokerage is an amazingly capital efficient model if you do it correctly. I mean,
it's also agile. I mean, if your business is struggling, you just get rid of some humans.
Shrink, yeah.
Like you don't, unlike trucking companies, you're stuck with the trucks and the warehouses and the
theoretically, you are always making the decision whether or not you want to, how you want to price the customer freight. And obviously it's based on your confidence in your ability to find carriers at whatever you think the market clearing price will be. Obviously that's what we think Select also does, is gives you some good information on the spot market clearing price, certainly as it relates to SMB carriers. You can always turn down freight. People don't like to do that, as we know, especially as we've gotten into this era where everyone is very focused on top line growth. And so as you continue to take on more and more freight, if that freight is underwater, then every incremental load, if you're losing on every load, is a negative P&L impact. And so I think that was really what ultimately caused the downfall in a couple of these that were they had to show growth. They had to show top line growth.
And they also had some loans that had covenants that they were in breach of due to margin thresholds and things like that.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, we went through the proceedings for both Surge and Convoy to ensure that we were trying to make ourselves whole, obviously, and in many cases we do, but it doesn't come from the carrier.
I want to talk a little bit about the state of freight.
Yeah.
So you guys see in your factoring business, you see these volumes, prices are definitely up, rates are definitely up, it's driving top line. Dollars, fuel's also up, so you're getting the benefit. You guys, in many ways, benefit from higher rate and higher fuel.
Kind of depends, diesel and price action for freight markets are, I think, long-term related, but they're not as causal as you would think.
No, I understand that, but in your business, higher total, higher
not
value.
always. So I think in many cases you will find that higher diesel prices do not necessitate higher spot rates.
I agree with that.
You're paying off of all-in rates, and I agree. The market
We've
bear the
talked
higher
about this
spot rates.
extensively. I remember there was this argument I had with Ken Adamo when he was at DAT about. He kept describing the market as diesel was going up. He's saying, well, that explains the whole rate run, and it just didn't make any sense.
Right, it's not
Market clearing
cost-based
prices are mostly driven by supply and demand.
They're completely driven by supply.
Yes.
And they're disintermediated. And the reason we know that is fuel has been we've had these micro labs essentially where we've had fuel go hyperbolic. Rate at the same time went hyperbolic, but then fuel cooled off significantly. We went from $115 a barrel to 75, I think, was the
and rates
low.
continue to run.
And rates continue to run. So they're disintermediated. I think years ago we did a study when we first started FreightWaves, and it was like 55% of the entire rate movement, gross rate movement, could be explained by diesel. So there's a lot of other factors in there. A lot of times the reason diesel prices go up and rate goes up at the same time is because the economy is going up, and that drives oil and oil demand in addition.
That's the long-term correlation. I think you can track it to GDP.
But short-term, you can't explain rate through diesel.
I
now,
agree.
Carriers get offended by that because they're like, well, what about cash flow? Which they're not wrong.
No, it is a cost
They
driver.
should have.
It is absolutely a cost driver. So if there is a sudden influx in costs, of course it's going to affect the carrier's business, but it doesn't necessitate that they can go back and demand more money.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about...
The exposure there is only for spot freight, right? Contract freight, in almost every case, is going to run with a separate fuel surcharge. It's going to go up and down. The line haul
Yes, I'm talking about
contract
spot.
freight, fuel up. So
let's talk a little bit about
spot.
state of freight. So we've had... we do this every single day from Monday through Friday. We have 4 guests on a day, and we get... these are some of the most influential, impactful executives that see all sorts of freight. We get different opinions on how long this cycle will run or how short it will be. I would love to get your thoughts on what is your thoughts in terms of where we're at in this cycle. Are we early? Early innings, I think, is the favorite quote that Julie's pulled from every public earnings call. They're all sheep, by the way. Public CEOs are like, let's just say it. Do you think we're mid? Do you think we're late?
I think the data would tell you that we're early. I think...
Why do you say that?
Because I think ultimately there is, generally speaking, we have seen very little what I would call normalization off of what were artificially deflated freight rates over the course of the last 3 years. I think we were all looking around asking ourselves, how is it possible that rates have been this low for this long? And I think we got an answer or at least an answer that tracks, in my opinion, around all of the regulatory things that are happening now, non-domiciled CDLs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, you had capacity in the market that was artificially deflating freight rates. I think if you look at the long-term trend, and so when we look at the inflation-adjusted freight rates over the course of the entirety of the time that OTR has been factoring invoices and been in business, we are still significantly below the median. And so when I think about early versus mid-cycle versus late, it's related to the inflation-adjusted long-term view of where freight rates.
Okay, so I want to give you a couple of different feedback we've gotten in the last 2 weeks. So we have one person, and I'm not going to tell you who it is because I don't want to bias your opinions.
Yep.
One person said they believe that the government, this tightening in capacity, is been so significant. The shippers are going to put a lot of pressure on the government to loosen And therefore, the cycle is going to be, we're going to peak sometime mid next year, and it's going to loosen. That was one thought. There's another executive, and I have respect for these people, by the way. Another executive came on to FreightWaves today and said that they thought that we would see a 20 to 25% reduction of additional capacity. Put this in perspective, according to our data, we can account for 35,000 trucks that have been reduced from the market. Out of it's approximately about 5% of the overall capacity. So if we're talking 20 to 25% reductions from here on out due to the regulatory crackdown, we're talking about a hyperbolic level
higher prices,
of much higher rates.
Yeah.
So you have almost two extremes. And then we had a third person who was called an analyst who argued that
capacity will find a way to enter the market.
Yeah, capacity will find a way to enter. Historically, we've seen these things trend. Larger motor carriers always add capacity. So we got really three. And by the way, I have respect for every one of those people's opinions in terms of they're thoughtful. I don't know. I have my own opinion on how long this runs. I'd love to get your take on which of those three, because it feels like we're sort of bookending between a very short cycle that's going to get easily corrected by new capacity entrants or a lack of regulation or an easing up of regulation, all the way to, you could all even argue that's an extreme perspective. So who do you think is talking their book? And who do you think is actually right?
Yeah, I think the concept that where's the capacity going to come from is the answer that I generally give when we talk about capacity will be found. I think if prices get to a certain level, then naturally there will be more demand for people to enter the trucking industry. I still think the level that rates have to get to is significantly higher than we are today.
Because they're not able to return out capital.
For organic, right? Because you're still below.
Still below cost.
If you look at if you look at the ATRI cost study that they publish once a year, it's 2025 data, and we're still very much below what would be a break even, a long-term break even from a cost per mile.
We've talked about this extensively. The other sort of. So go ahead, sorry.
But I would just say, from a regulatory perspective, a lot of what the capacity reduction things that have been done are predicated around safety. And so I think it's a very tough sell to me that you're going to have government officials effectively saying we don't care as much about safety, which is it's just a tough sell to say we're going to loosen regulatory, which the tightening on regulatory has primarily been around safety. I think that's I don't know that you'd have a ton of people that would stand on that.
I wrote an op-ed in New York Times, by far not a, and it was very favorable to the DOT. Certainly, the New York Times is not known to be a favorable to the administration.
Yep. And
it was interesting because that opinion piece was about truck safety. But I argued that the lack of barriers to entry was a problem. This current DOT is cracking down. And the New York Times audience, sort of, certainly left of center.
Yep.
And some people think really left, some people say it's center. I think it's probably more mid to left of center, but not as aggressive as some people take. I think the New York Times does an amazing job. What was interesting about that was the comments. They get the 1,200 comments on my article in like 5 hours, and they shut down the comments. I don't know if they had a limit or whatever, but I don't think it was an editorial decision. I think they literally have a limit on how many comments.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was interesting because almost all of the comments, there was a couple of political stuff, but nearly 99% of those comments were for more regulation and for more immigration, not the fact that wanted crackdowns, but immigration enforcement related to English proficiency, non-domiciled CDLs and stuff. And look, this is a moment in time.
Yep.
But to your point, whom in Congress is going to advocate for lower regulations when it's in the eyes of safety? And I think, honestly, this immigration thing is also a factor here. If you drew a Venn diagram into the regulation crackdown, immigration is certainly a factor in this administration pro-immigration, or anti-immigration, or their immigration stance. I think the administration has the higher ground when they're able to argue safety. It's very different than seeing kids dragged out of their homes.
Right.
And being deported where ICE shows up in a neighborhood.
And I think more generally it's about standards. And I think if you ask anybody in trucking over the last several years, certainly over the course of the COVID and post-COVID, the standards feel as though we have had to make concessions on standards in our industry. And I think the people who are passionate about our industry, the hundreds of thousands and millions of legitimate trucking operators that want to do a good job have had to make concessions on standards that they shouldn't have had to have made, because there isn't accountability to those standards.
All right,
so for me, I just think it's something where if we continue to stay accountable to the standards, the premium operators that are doing a really good job and keeping this country moving will finally be able to make ends meet. And at a certain point, does that mean that trucking might be something that people actually want to get into again? Maybe. But I think we've got a lot of room to run if that's going to be the case.
So Clayton, appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
How's Georgia going to do? Are they going to have a good season?
I'm always bullish on Georgia. You know, we've got Gunner coming back.
Always bullish or bullish this year?
Under Kirby, I'm always bullish. So, you know, we need a little better pass rush this year and a little more explosiveness on the offensive side of the ball, and I think we'll have a really good year.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming in. Glad to be in your hometown. Really appreciate it. We'll be right back after these messages.
The drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and crews who keep the world moving deserve tools that work as hard as they do. That's what Samsara builds, technology for safer, more efficient operations, made with the people who do the work. Samsara, built with operators for operators. Learn more at samsara.com.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference, it's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else, the connections that change the trajectory of your business, the relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. Back here in Atlanta at the College Football Hall of Fame, I am getting geared up not geared up. I'm in a jacket, although I am rooting for the Bears and I am in green. But someone that has actually geared up, and their University of Tennessee Vols.
Yes, sir.
We have Tony Broyles. He is the head of sales at Overdrive Logistics. Tony, you are a Tennessee volunteer. You went to Tennessee.
Yep.
We're here at the College Football Hall of Fame. Are you getting excited for college football?
I always get excited for college football. Sometimes I get disappointed, but I always say, as a Tennessee fan, if you're a Tennessee fan, you know about hope and faith.
Well, I can tell you every year, because we're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're surrounded by SEC people.
Right.
So there's this interesting sort of place because we have the Alabama fans, we have the Georgia fans, and then we have the Tennessee fans. But Tennessee fans always say, this is our year, every single year. Are you one of those guys?
I'm not one of those guys. I've learned the hard way not to be one of those guys. But I've got a great friend that's an Alabama fan. My wife is a Georgia fan. I'm surrounded by Georgia fans. One of our founders, Gary Copeland, is a huge Georgia fan. He's not happy I'm wearing orange to this, so, I learned to get along. I learned to temper expectations and play nice.
It's been a brutal, miserable couple of decades since Phil Fulmer.
It has. But we've got a much better coaching staff now. We're getting some really good recruits. Hopefully, we can make something out of it.
So let's talk a little bit about the freight market, something that you do win at. Tell our audience a little bit about Overdrive.
Yeah. So Overdrive, we've been around for 28 years. We're not a billion-dollar broker. We're a small to medium-sized broker, but we've been very successful at what we've done because we focus on honesty, integrity, relationships. We've got our top 10 customers. We have over an average of about 19 years with those customers. So we have long-term, long-standing relationships. Some of our best customers have been with us for the full term, 28 years. So, we're adding new customers all the time. We're growing the business, but we're growing it strategically. We want to work with companies that want to be partners and that we can help understand the market and understand what's happening out there and make a mutually beneficial arrangement. So you're working in brokerage. You came from the shipper world. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Yeah, I've got a unique career path. I started out, in supply chain at Ryder, but I've migrated over to the shipper side. I've worked for some manufacturers, food companies. So I've been, on both sides of things. I'm more empathetic to both sides. I can understand what it means to have salespeople and operations people screaming at you about, products sitting on the dock and why are we over budget from the shipper perspective. But then I also understand on the other side why is that happening? Well, maybe because your freight's not carrier friendly. Maybe we need to work on working on your dock schedule, working on your loading times, things like that. Understanding the market. Why is it hard to get a truck, this month going to Florida? Well, here's why. And so it's allowed me to see both sides of the game and understand how to best meet the needs of our customers. When you were at a shipper, you had worked in logistics, you then were running traffic departments at a shipper. What was the biggest aha moment or shock to you? Like, I wish I had known this, that I didn't know if you're... What would you tell a young logistics person that they should know about what's going on in the shipper operation, and vice versa, which is the one that what shippers knew about logistics business? Yeah, that's a great question. On the broker side of things, I have this conversation every day with people on our team at Overdrive. It's easy to see your side of the picture and think, these people just need to do it a different way. This shipper is making a bad decision, but you got to understand all the different pressures. Like I said, they've got budgets, they've got people screaming at them. They may be on a forklift, unloading a truck themselves, and so we can't get in touch with them when we need to schedule an appointment. There's all kinds of things that happen. So just understanding that there's more to the picture. I guess the biggest aha moment for me would have been just understanding, what are the dynamics that go into the market? What are all the factors? It's not just a matter of, can we get a good truck? Why can't we get a good truck for this lane? Well, there's all kinds of things like the seasonality or the capacity thing that we're seeing now happening. So just understanding all the different aspects. There's so many different factors. It's not. When did reality set in for you in terms of market tightening? When was the aha moment that this is not a seasonal winter? We started seeing it in November,
You were early because there was still a lot of folks that just didn't believe it was happening.
Yeah, we had seen it coming. I mean, we knew we were ripe for it. I mean, we had gone so long with artificially low rates. You know, shippers have been reaping the benefit of it for years, and you know, it was kind of a mutually developed downward spiral, I guess you would say, with both the carrier broker side and the shippers, and it had gone on too long, and we started seeing pressure on lanes that we basically started seeing seasonality, peak season impacts happening in November where previous years that didn't happen, right? I mean, it should have been happening and it wasn't. Well, last year we saw it happening.
Do you think your experience as in logistics sort of gave you an advance? Because we talked about this extensively, Julie, not necessarily on this show, but just the overall market conditions seemed like there was a large sense of, I wouldn't call it denial, but maybe this is sort of explaining away, this is nothing more than winter weather, this is holiday. But it does strike me that your perspective talking about November is different than what a lot of others had.
Yeah, I think that and the fact that, you know, we've been in this for so long with long-term relationships. We've seen the patterns so many times, and it just wasn't happening for the last 2-3 years. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing in November, we're seeing rates that are significantly higher than we had been seeing previously. Yeah. And we knew that it was harder to find trucks in certain markets than it normally has been. And so that's where we saw it coming. I would say, you know, the real impact did come spring. You know, we knew it was real come February.
After the winter thaw.
When it continued into January and then February, we knew it was real. But one thing I'll say too, you know, for the shippers, if you think about it, you know, when COVID happened, there was a lot of people that got out of the industry. There was just a change in the way everything worked on the shipper side that led to a whole new way of doing things. You've got a lot of people who haven't been in this industry pre-COVID, right? I mean, so they don't know what to expect. They think what's happened in the last few years is normal, and so
we talk about that a lot.
Yeah,
procurement departments, they just think every year they're supposed to lower rates.
Lower rates every year.
I need cheaper rates. My job is to get cheaper rates.
Right. And that's just not the reality of how the market works long term.
So what would you say shippers should be doing right now to secure capacity for the rest of this year and into 27?
Yeah, they need to be working with somebody they trust, first off. I mean, you know, the old 2023, 2024, or even 2025 playbook of just have a bunch of brokers and have them all bid against each other for the cheapest rate. That doesn't work anymore. I mean, you know, there's certainly an aspect of that on some of the more flexible lanes, but when you've got service expectations and critical loads and appointments that have to be met, and you know, you need to lock down capacity now on those, I would say. You know, there's still going to be a market for spot freight, but you know, if you've got a load that moves once a month, don't lock down a rate on that now. You know, we see that happen with a lot of shippers, and that's just not something I'd recommend. But
it's not going to be accepted at that rate anyway.
Right, it's not. You're exactly right. It won't. Then it'll just burn a bridge. It'll create a relationship issue. But work with you know, above that, I would say you've got to have a partner or partners that you trust that are sharing information with you and giving you market intelligence that helps you understand what's coming.
So one of the things we've been talking a lot about is this security crisis, this compliance. I wouldn't call it a crisis. Maybe it is the lack of compliance prior was a crisis, but it's changing the way that brokers are thinking about freight. It's changing the way that shippers are demanding and picking suppliers. Right. What are you seeing right now in terms of what your shippers' expectations of you as a broker are today that maybe a year ago or 2 years ago didn't exist?
Yeah, I mean, the shippers are definitely learning. You know, it's still, I think, an expectation that broker, you know, you've got the responsibility to manage our freight, but we do things, you know, we actually started before all the publicity on the security issue came about, but you know, we get pictures of driver's license. We get pictures of them beside their truck, beside their cab door with their MC. We do things to make sure we know who that truck is.
How do you avoid AI? Because AI pictures are easy to do, but how do you?
Yeah, I mean, we do it in real time. I mean, I guess you could still have somebody trying to trick you with AI, but I mean, we do, we're using, you know, we use Highway, we use all the tools that are out there to really vet our carriers as well as we can. But then we have humans talking to humans for one thing. I mean, we have human conversations. We're not dispatching with AI. We're having human conversations, and we're asking for that information. We'll even ask them to hold up 2 fingers or hold up 3 fingers and give us something.
You want to see if they have 8 fingers? Is that what it is? Or I mean, it's usually the AI.
The hands.
It's gotten so good. That it's usually the like really weird things that you have to pay attention. The details are where AI isn't very good.
That's true. That's true.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about something we've been tracking is open postings on load boards, because that's the highest risk transaction.
Right.
Have you guys started to pull back on your open postings just to avoid some of the carriers that you're not familiar with? We talked about this a little bit with Clayton a few minutes ago, just how, the market's changing, and the highest risk load are the parties you don't know. Any change there?
Yeah, we're definitely more careful with what we post and how we post it. We like to rely on those relationships on the carrier side. We have a lot of consistent long-term freight that we don't even post. But when we have to post, and be honest, we're in the spot market with a lot of freight. We are posting a lot. We've got a lot of vetting that happens, and we will even validate. We'll make a phone call to contact a validated number to verify that the person we spoke to is authorized to book a truck. So we're not just relying on a quick hit on a load board. We're actually going that extra step to make sure, because you can't take chances. I mean, it's happened.
So if my son were to enter the freight market, no experience, what would you give him? What advice would you tell him? He's right out of college. He went to. Just imagine he went to UT.
The guy.
Has a logistics degree. What would you tell somebody coming out of UT's logistics program that they should know that you wish you knew 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
It sounds cliche, but honestly, it's, focus on relationships. Get to know people and build connections. That's so important. There's so many people, people get intimidated by approaching somebody who maybe has your level of experience and knowledge and reputation in the industry. But I think everybody's open to share information and help. Build those relationships, because this, as big as it is, this is a small industry.
So small, yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to cross paths again.
I think it's amazing advice. I tell my son that all the time, is that it's in school they teach you what you should know. But I don't think there's enough emphasis on who you should know. And I think, and a lot of times you get this thing, this is a club, and I'm not a member of the club, and I'm on the outcast of the club if you're not in that. And I've been in industries, not in freight, where I was not from that industry. And it's hard to break in. But I always tell young founders and young people, my son included, it's all networking.
It is.
And it's
harder when you're younger, though. It's intimidating when you're younger.
It is intimidating, but it's never been easier with LinkedIn, with social media. I recommend to him to just follow X accounts. Of course, I'm a prolific X user. But it's also because with X, you're not defined in your sort of career network. You're defined with you accessing some of the most influential people on the planet. I think it's kind of cool that you have that you can have random conversations with these sort of.
You can find someone who is further along in their career who can be that conduit to help introduce you to people as well.
Yeah,
Make
for
it a little
sure.
bit less
It's just all, and it's a numbers game at the end of the day, isn't it?
So.
In terms of like networking is just But it takes a little bit of gravitas.
And it is so hard, because this generation has grown, this most recent generation has grown up in social media, and we all of us hide behind our phones and our social media accounts. And I've got a 24-year-old son. Aiden is trying to get a job right now, and it's not easy for anybody, but that's my advice to him, and he's not in the industry.
Go.
Network, make connections. Everybody's talking about AI. Young people are not fans of AI. I just heard a report this morning that 60% of people don't trust AI. It's going to be part of everything we do going forward, no matter what.
Because they're told it's going to
take their jobs,
or in society.
I don't believe that it is.
No,
I think it's going to be a good tool to use, but it's going to have its place, and then nothing will ever take the place of personal relationships.
I had a meeting last week with a major mall operator, and what they told me was that the Generation Z, or the Zoomers, and Gen Alpha, the young people. These are Gen Alphas after the Zoomers.
Right.
Kids that are generations that are my kids' age are going to the malls.
Yeah.
The mall rats are bad.
And they're getting flip
Literally,
phones.
we taught my husband said something about mall rats this week. I have an 11-year-old, and she goes, "What's a mall rat?" And I'm like, people hang out in the mall. She's like, "Oh, that's me. I want to be that."
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
they
because
like going to the
there's
mall
also
again.
this weird thing in magazines where they're buying physical. To them, that's the high tech. It's sort of like, as my generation, I own a bunch of magazines, but my generation didn't want the physical magazine. We wanted the internet was the innovative thing, the digital website. But young people are looking at physical forms of, what they'll do.
Feels luxurious.
Well, what they'll do, which was interesting, there's all these studies, and I was talking to, the mall operator, is they will do their research online. And then they'll go to the store to pick it up. Versus the way it used to be, we would go to the store and then find it online.
funny,
It's
that's
the
true.
inverse of that.
You want to see if it's in stock before you go. You want to figure out what you want and then go
really
pick it up
are.
and
But
actually
they were
try it
doing
on.
their research before, and then they
I
go to the
get-
mall
Al
because
does
there's
that.
something about that physical experience.
My daughter absolutely does that.
But it's still networking, and I think it's it's the loneliest generation, they say. Because they're just so disconnected, but the devices have made us lonelier.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
and the
great
ones-
advice.
And the ones that do step out and get out of their comfort zone and get those connections are going.
They win.
They're going to win. You're
Because
right.
we're not used to that.
Right.
In fact, I think even if you follow, this is all about society, but even dating trends. You see these women in New York, in Manhattan, are complaining that men don't approach them anymore, and they're like, "Please approach me," because they're so over the devices. And this is not just dating; it's
every
social
aspect.
media. It's just everything is so device centric that younger people who actually understand physical networking
Right.
have an enormous advantage. That's the advice I give of my son, and he's been running with it and done quite well.
I tell mine not to walk around with their headphones either. Like,
The other thing is the headphones and the devices,
always.
always.
Yeah.
If you're observing what's going on
sending a
around you, you
message.
could be learning. Well, you could also be learning by looking around.
But don't you see, going to a concert and everyone's at the concert, but they're literally doing this with their
phones
phone?
and watching the show.
Experience it, people.
Yeah.
So I know that that's sort of the thing going on in life. Well, really appreciate you coming in. We're in your hometown.
Yeah.
Really excited to be here. Best of luck to the Vols. Where do you guys think you finish?
I think we finished strong. My goal, it's interesting because of the new shakeup in our conference, we don't play Georgia or Florida this year, and we've always played
That's a
Georgia,
travesty,
Florida.
right?
It is.
You guys.
It is. It's a shame. So I'm hoping
Those
maybe
are big games.
Maybe we meet one of them in the. Maybe we meet Georgia in the SEC.
Now,
championship.
Alabama, you do play.
We do every.
Is that
year.
always going to be? every
Yeah,
year?
that's a permanent rivalry there. So.
Yeah. Well, Georgia. Florida was always a big rivalry.
It is.
Since the Tim Tebow days, and even back to Peyton Manning. That was a big piece of it.
Yeah, so.
Well,
Thanks
best
for
of
having
luck
me.
in the
Enjoyed it.
season.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and best of luck in the fall with the freight market.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. We'll be right back from the College Football Hall of Fame here in Atlanta. We're going to get into the railroads and talk with Norfolk Southern's Chief Commercial Officer right after these messages.
Huge thanks to today's OTR sponsor, again, OTR Solutions. They believe the right partner should know your business, understand your goals, and be there when it really matters. It's no accident that OTR boasts 4.7 stars on Google. They know that excellent customer support is at the center of every relationship. With responsive teams, industry knowledge, and a commitment to long-term growth, OTR gives customers more than service. It gives them a partner designed to help their business succeed. Learn more again with OTR.
Doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else, the connections that change the trajectory of your business, the relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
FreightWaves today here from the College Football Hall of Fame. It is fall. Well, it's not just fall. But it is fitting that we're here at the College Football Hall of Fame because this is also one of the major freight corridors in the entire world, with Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport, it's the largest commercial airport in the entire world in terms of traffic, the 4th largest port in Savannah, and one of the hometown corporations that keeps our freight moving is Norfolk Southern. Welcome. We have the right person, the right guest to talk about the state of rail freight, something that we at FreightWaves today are huge fans of. We have Ed Elkins. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer of Norfolk Southern. Welcome to FreightWaves today, Ed.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I do follow you on X, so I get to watch you, listen to you.
Don't know what I've said. You can sparse and stuff. But, Atlanta is such an important, Georgia has done an amazing job of just continuing to build out infrastructure and invest in the supply chain with the port, the Georgia ports down at Savannah, the Hartsfield International Airport, these intro lines that you guys have built, you and other railroads have built to take containers off of the highways and onto the rails. Tell us a little bit about why Georgia is such an important location for Norfolk Southern.
Well, great question, and I like to go back in time and just figure out how we got here, right? And so for Norfolk Southern, of course, we are the culmination of the Norfolk and Western Railroad, the Southern Railroad, and Conrail back in the 90s. And Atlanta was the Southern Railroad's headquarters, operational headquarters, for over a century. In fact, as our old headquarters is just south of here, it still says Southern Railway on the side of the building. Then when NNW merged with the Southern, the entire new corporation's operational center of mass really came to Atlanta. And there was a lot of reasons why, of course. This is the meeting spot for about 5 major rail lines that we own right here in Atlanta. So it's a big hub for us in the Southeast. But then when we acquired our portion of Conrail in 1999, the strategy really became very clear for us that we had what we call the Golden Triangle, which was a very robust logistics hub in Chicago, another one in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then Atlanta. And that triangle really and truly over the past 25 years has delivered exceptional value, not only for Norfolk Southern and for our shareholders, but for our customers. So you think about it, Atlanta has 2 major intermodal facilities for us. We have 2 major freight yards here as well. You go down to Macon, another very large manifest hump yard, what we call. And then you move over to Garden City in Savannah. Of course, we serve Georgia Ports Authority there. And then down at Brunswick, we have a very large operation there with Georgia Ports Authority where we both import and export automobiles.
I'm a big fan
Open a
of...
new inland port in Gainesville as well?
And we have Gainesville, which just came online this year. Thanks for the assist. And we're really bullish on what that's going to look like and what it means for the state and for Norfolk Southern.
I'm a big fan of the Southern Railroad being from Chattanooga. It was an iconic name that passed through our great city of Chattanooga. Green trains, and I love the livery of the old Southern Railroad, just beautiful. I personally like that a little bit better than the black. That's just a personal preference.
Well, more history there, right? The Southern green color was actually part of the campaign that the Southern Railroad used over time, which was Southern gives a green light to innovation.
Okay.
And so green was always associated with the Southern Railway because the Southern was very, very innovative and had to be because it didn't have what I would call a big fortress market like coal fields or grain or the things that traditionally over the early 20th century kind of defined railroads. The Southern was a railroad that was an amalgamation of smaller ones, served many places in the South, but no real giant center of mass.
That's a great piece of history.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in, Julie knows how much I nerd out on the train stuff.
And now the N&W was black. That was their color. And they also had some other colors like maroon, which I also like for that livery. But a prior president of the Norfolk and Western had said, we're going to paint them black because dirty engines haul just as much freight as clean ones.
That makes sense. I mean, it's an iconic color. You see them. You guys have a great logo. Terminus, Atlanta's original name. It's a railroad town built by the railroads. An interesting thing is Atlanta, there's no river. Most cities back in the, hundreds of years ago were built around rivers. The idea of connecting Savannah to Chattanooga and then just randomly picking this random spot in Georgia is reason that we're here in Atlanta.
Yeah, you even look at the soccer team here in Atlanta, the Atlanta United. It is really predicated on the idea that this was terminus where all these rail lines came in, and it's in their. I think it's in their uniform too.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of that golden triangle, we didn't do this in our update today, but I had pulled some data to look at specifically intermodal growth and where we saw the largest volume of growth and opportunity for mode conversion and cost savings, coincidentally, was out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania and Atlanta. So massive growth that we're seeing in the railroads really as far as volume availability in the eastern half of the country.
Sure.
Tell us what you're seeing as far as the market and how it relates to intermodal.
We are, we believe that the freight market, let's talk about highway, reached some kind of inflection point early this year. I don't know if the catalyst was the Iran conflict or whether it was, sort of a spring back from all the weather that happened early in the Midwest. But we saw freight begin to surge, and it wasn't just us. It was really across the national network. And for us, it's really manifested itself in just a couple ways. One of them is definitely intermodal. We're seeing really strong domestic truckload volume, non-premium. And then we're also seeing very strong, in relative terms, LTL volumes. So there's a lot of demand. And then you go over to our merchandise markets, which is things like center beams with lumber, boxcars with canned goods, et cetera. Those are, I would call, other substitutes for highway transportation, and we've seen them begin to surge, even in markets, let's talk about center beams, where it's frankly a down lumber market. It's not a really hot lumber market right now, but there's a lot of demand, and I think it really shows the latent power of railroads to offer value to customers when you see these extraordinary price increases happen because of either fuel or demand on the highway.
And I wonder if that is specific to flatbed capacity really had the highest
in history. It was breaking all records.
Massively high tender rejections. I wonder if some of that comes
and rates.
to your point.
We got over $4.30 or something a mile on flatbed.
Exactly. So I think when you think about a market that's flat or even maybe declining like lumber, but we're still getting a lot of conversion opportunity. I think it's really because we're able to offer a value to those customers that they can substitute that highway transit.
So one of the things is all this, I call it debate, or there seems to be a consensus that this is not a volume-driven recovery. And I want to sparse the railroads away from the truckers. So the truckers, I think every single public CEO that we talked to has said it's a capacity situation, it's a reduction of capacity, not volume. However, and I don't know how many folks actually look at the rail data. I think they should. We're trying to evangelize it on behalf of...
Used to be really important.
But they seem to have gotten away from it, because if you look at the rail data, particularly the bulk industrial data, it's telling a very different story about the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is incredibly robust. And while intermodal is really a lot of finished goods, it's a lot of retail goods, a lot of consumer goods, the rails are telling us that we're having one of the strongest economic recoveries, industrial recoveries that we've had in decades.
I think you're right.
And why is that? Why is it that the truckers, in your perspective, are they just so have been abused by this great freight recession where they're afraid to call it? Like, what do you think is driving some of that caution?
Probably a little bit of everything, but let's sort of break it apart. We've had 4 years of a freight recession that I personally predicted would be over 4 times. Right?
You and both.
And so you know, there's a fair amount of people have been trained now to think that things are just down, right? Or maybe they're not going to be up.
We can't have nice things, right?
Right. I think the other part of it is there's been so much attention paid, maybe in general media, maybe in transportation media, about the reduction in driver availability for a variety of reasons, all of which are probably true, which have reduced some of that capacity out there. At the same time, you look at the manufacturing numbers. It's a really, really robust manufacturing environment right now.
Yeah. Have you seen anything like this in your career?
If you go back to 2003, that was a year like this.
Yeah.
2010 was kind of a year like this.
Well, 2010 would have been a massive recovery coming out of the great.
Yeah, 2000.
And there was so much so much stimulus money.
A lot of stimulus money.
What I think is interesting about this is that this particular recovery, if we are looking at industrial demand, is not being driven by federal government stimulus dollars, but by AI. It's like, listen, this morning, it's the largest CapEx spend in world history.
Yes.
It's not just in the United States, global, but the amount of capital and corporate earnings, because everyone's like, this is a bubble. Corporate earnings are up 50% in the S&P 500. I mean, it's astounding how strong this economy is, and you guys are. I mean, we look at the rail data, and I post this stuff on X, and I'm like, oh, the rails are up 4%. It's amazing, and I get, everyone's like, oh, 4%, what's that? I'm like, dude, this isn't an AI data center. This is not software. When you have a 4% growth in rail volume,
that's right.
That is the GDP, the core GDP running.
Yeah, and I did repost yours and agree, just so you know. But
appreciate that. I need all the love on there. It's a hostile environment.
But I will say this. I think it's a couple of things going on. One is the deregulatory environment that's out there right now. There's a lot of innovation being unleashed because of the unshackling of the regulatory burdens out there, both at the state and at the federal level. And then you think about AI spending. I think that goes a long way to explaining that flatbed number. It really does.
Yep.
What we saw, we manage an industrial development pipeline continuously. And typically, you have a velocity on that pipeline that moves from, early stage development all the way up to design and build. And what we saw last year, that pipeline got longer and longer, but the velocity slowed down in that pipeline because people were sort of sitting on their hands or keeping their hands in their pockets and not deploying the capital, whether it was because of tariffs, economic uncertainty, whatever. But this year, along about that same time, early year, we saw that pipeline begin to move and the velocity has really increased. And so we finished the first half, I think I talked about it on our last earnings call, with about a 50% improvement in the number of projects that had moved into that design and construction phase. And that's when we reach that stage, for me, that's critical because that means someone is actually putting money in the ground at that point. It's not just a blueprint. It's not just a PowerPoint.
And is that beyond data centers? Is this manufacturing core production?
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, data centers are really important for the U.S. and for our strategy. At the same time, data centers don't really have any freight. Yeah. So I'm out recruiting and attempting to find people who are going to build things.
It's power. It's nat gas lines. It's the
we're all looking for the same things.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there is a fair amount of reshoring happening.
Yeah.
I think it's still early stages for sure, but I think there's some of that going on. I think there's clearly some industrial expansion going on. We have, like I said, about 50% more projects now in that new phase. And it might slow down and sort of normalize here in the second half of the year, but even that's very healthy.
We had the CEO of GXO on 2 weeks ago, and he talked about the fact that this year reshoring is real. And there's been this big conversation that's been going on for at least a decade. But it's actually, I think, fundamentally starting. It seems like you guys are seeing the same thing.
I think we're starting to see some of it. I really do.
Do you think it's sustainable, or do you think it's driven by just the tariff noise, or do you think there's something else that's driving it?
Well, I've said this for a long time. There's two things that America is really, really good at. Okay, we have two superpowers economically. One of them is producing calories, right? In terms of the agriculture.
Although the GLP-1s would disagree with you there.
Agriculture,
but we can feed the world. Yeah, and it's remarkable how much productive American industrial horsepower there is out there that is really generating honestly a lot of business for the U.S. And the second one is energy. So BTUs and calories, that's our two superpowers. And I think if you're sitting in Europe, if you're sitting in Asia or anywhere else, and you're thinking about, I'm going to manufacture some heavy industry or some chemical or some byproduct of some derivative of the consumer economy, where do I want to be?
So why do you think, because I've become pretty, the chief economist at Bloomberg and I have had this conversation, is that what they've seen is that because of the war and higher energy prices is actually driving demand for U.S. manufacturing, particularly heavy manufacturing. And she's pointed out that energy is a much more important factor in manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, than labor.
For sure.
And so a lot of manufacturing is coming to the United States because of our safe and secure energy supplies.
Yep.
Do you think that the general public understands that? I don't think Wall Street does. I've gone on every TV network, and they always are a little surprised when I talk about how bullish I am. In spite of the war, they're just like, how could you be so bullish? I'm like, come on, people. We have petrochemicals. We produce so much energy, and it's not a conflict zone.
No. And you have rule of law. You got pretty good infrastructure, both in terms of not only roads, highways, certainly railroads, but also energy dominance. That's the only way you can describe it. Yeah. And that is, again, a superpower of this country.
And it's to be said, the railroads, I've had this conversation. Patrick Fuchs and I had a chance, he's head of the STB, to talk about just how important the railroads are. American railroads get for the consumers go to Europe, people go to Europe and they're like, oh, they have great trains there. We don't have great trains here. And I'm like, you don't understand how robust our rail network is in the United States. It's just stuff. It's not humans. Yes, passenger rail in the U.S. isn't a great experience except in certain corridors, but the railroads drive our economy, and it's so important. And of course now, there's the big question that's, I think, in front of the STB. I'd love to get your take.
Sure.
The merger between NS and UP. You knew it was going to come up today, so your thoughts on where we're at in the merger process. What's your case for that transaction?
Well, I think we've had some recent movement, and I won't bore everyone with the details of that. You can go Google it. But I will say this: we're making progress, and I think our case is very solid. And here's what I would say: we have a compelling value proposition for our customers, our shareholders, and for our employees that putting together a transcontinental network is going to reduce the friction of interchange, eliminate the friction of interchange, increase the velocity of our product, and improve the reliability for our customers when it comes to delivering value for their customers, not only in America, but around the globe. And when I think of, this is the way I try to explain it to my kids at home, when they ask me about the merger is, well, would it be okay if I shipped a package from here to Chicago and then I have to go hire another package company to move it the rest of the way to LA? That sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we want to be as competitive as we possibly can be on a global stage to deliver value for the American manufacturing base as well as our customers.
Well put.
So post-transaction, assuming it gets approved and assuming that you guys merge, it's going to take years to, I think it's the 8th largest merger in U.S. history, if my data is correct in terms of size and scale. So it's a massive merger, not just in transportation. It's going to take a while for you guys to integrate, but you're still going to have a major presence here in Atlanta, is that right?
For sure. We have a big presence in Georgia in general, as we talked about earlier, but here in Atlanta, yes, and we will continue to. There's a reason we decided in 2021 to move our headquarters from Norfolk down here to Atlanta, and by the way, not just to Atlanta, but right across the highway from Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
It's been a great resource for us as a standalone company, and with the new company. Here's what I believe will happen. It's not a prediction, but it's what I believe will happen. You will continue to see a very big presence in information technology here in Atlanta. Most likely, innovation will continue to be a core principle for us here in Atlanta. And on the commercial side, there's a compelling reason to have many of your commercial folks located close to your customers and within arm's reach of, as you said, the busiest airport on the planet.
Atlanta is such a major, as a kid, we didn't go to Nashville. Nashville was in Chattanooga. We always went to Atlanta. It's such an amazing city and so great. And look, it's college football. It is Georgia Tech. I always root for Georgia Tech. Because they've had a couple good years. In the 90s, they had the national championship. They shared, I think it was Colorado. So, Georgia Tech fan. Well, really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in and glad to be in your hometown, Ed.
It's great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
All right.
Take care.
Great to see you.
We'll be right back. We're going to get into the cold chain when we return on FreightWaves Today from the College Football Hall of Fame. Stay with us.
This segment is brought to you by Descartes. The best supply chains aren't just faster, they're more connected. That's why leading companies rely on Descartes' global logistics network to connect, collaborate, and move freight with greater visibility and confidence. Powered by innovation and AI, Descartes helps businesses deliver smarter, uniting the people and technology that move the world. Learn more at Descartes.com.
If you haven't evaluated Motor City Systems software applications and integrations, it's time to take a look. Motor City's team brings deep industry knowledge to help improve carrier operations with its software and integrations, including Roller, customizable driver app and workflow, Relay, advanced messaging and communication, Torque, integration platform, Wire, modern EDI, TUT. Visit motorcity.systems to learn more.
Doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference, it's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business: the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts. 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head-to-head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today, here from the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta, Georgia. It is fall, and it is getting cooler and cooler, and there's nothing cooler than talking. See, you saw like that. Yeah, yes. It gets, we do this all the time. But anyways, nothing gets cooler than cold warehouses and the cold chain. And let's talk to Brian Dunn. He is the Senior Vice President of Facilities and Engineering, Head of Sustainability at Americold. The OG of the coolest warehouses. How you doing?
Doing good today. How are you?
Doing well. So let's talk about the cold chain, because this is, over the last decade, the cold chain has become probably the hottest, no pun intended, I get a lot of puns here, sector in warehousing. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing right now in terms of cold chain. What's driving this growth of the cold chain? Like, what exactly is happening right now in the market?
Well, I think with the cold chain, if you go back a few years, you had a lot of players jump into it. Obviously, right after Americold went public, we had a lot of players jump in, and you saw a lot of capacity come on the market. What I've seen trending over the last, I would say, 4 years following COVID, is you're starting to see that capacity start to stabilize. You're starting to see a lot of occupancy come back into the market. The other thing I would share that I'd see as a trend is really more of where the cold chain is being part of I'd say the freight network process, where we're looked at not just as a cold storage, but a critical point within that freight storage. So when you think about being located next to food manufacturers, rail, different ports, even the one that you featured on yesterday, I saw with Port St. John, which was a great one. Because we're there, and then in these major population densities that our areas at, it puts us in a unique position to be able to service those customers.
So Brian, think back to my career. I've been in freight my whole life, but it really is in the last decade where cold chain has become a major topic. And warehousing, I think, generally sort of a boring topic 20 years ago, and then really in the last 10 years, we've seen Prologis and they're not in the cold chain, but they build massive warehouse network. You guys are in cold chain. We've seen it become a very hot sector in terms of interest. Is e-commerce driving the investment in cold chain, or is there something else fundamental happening that has made it such an attractive investment?
Well, e-commerce is definitely a big piece of it, for sure. But I think that piece is, when you look at it as across 100% of it, no, it's probably a very small piece, but it is a growing piece. We have a partnership that we've worked with Good Ranchers, where we've had the opportunity to help them grow their business, and at the same time, we grow our own e-commerce business. But you are seeing more customers that are looking for that. They want to get that direct to consumer, so we are seeing more of that.
The whole meal kit thing has been hot. We've had some folks on from the meal kit industry. These companies that you can have food delivered. It seems like it's an emerging consumer trend. But what is driving the build out of the cold chain? Like, why is it getting so much investment in the last, say, 2 decades that, back in the old days, it felt like a lot of the cold chain was just grocery direct. The grocery stores would do it. But now there's this whole integrated network of refrigerated and cold chain warehouses. Is there something fundamental changing the way companies are designing their networks?
Well, I can't say that there's something fundamentally changed with other companies. What I would share is that for Americold, we were the first publicly traded cold storage REIT, and you saw the valuations, you saw the growth, you saw it move very, very quickly. And because of that, you had a lot of players that wanted to jump in, but they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the duration of time that our leadership and our teams have. And so you saw a lot of people doing speculative builds, putting a lot of capacity out on the market. Now that's kind of ended, and you're starting to see now where a lot of those players are moving away, getting out of it, and you're seeing those core teams, those core companies are still there and are growing their occupancy back.
I mean, Lineage is having to sell off some of their locations to shore up their balance sheet. I think to your point, a lot of the private equity-backed companies overbuilt capacity and now, in many ways, has that created some challenges in your business? Anytime you see a market where you have a lot of sort of undisciplined capital comes in, it's hard as an incumbent because you're having to fight off people who may not understand their cost. Has that made it more difficult than perhaps you guys would like, or?
Look, it's added a lot of capacity, and the capacity that comes in on the market, there's only so much supply for that capacity.
Yeah.
So it does make it a lot more competitive, but I think what differentiates Americold in that cold chain is it's not always about the rate. It's about the services that you can provide, the expertise that you can deliver. How are we able to consolidate some of their businesses? Instead of having them have to ship, as an example, someone that's making ice cream, they don't want to have to ship a whole pallet of chocolate ice cream to one store. What they'd like to do is what we would call a rainbow pallet, where you're shipping a specific amount of vanilla, some chocolate, some strawberry, and then some other goods and services on there as well.
Neapolitan ice cream. That's where it all came from, is let's put it in there together.
Yeah, service some others together so we're better able to service our customers.
That makes total sense. So when I think of innovation, and that's a great example of it, and I read your title, right? Facilities engineering, head of sustainability, all of that makes me think about energy. And you have to keep all of these things cold 24/7. So tell us a little bit about how you do that, how you ensure the continuity of that, and how you try to most efficiently and effectively use that energy.
I appreciate the question, and it's really a good one. When most people think about food, especially cold food, anything that's been refrigerated or frozen, they're thinking about that farm, or maybe they're thinking about the food manufacturer. Or if I was to ask a young kid, where does chicken come from, they'll tell me the grocery store, right? It comes from aisle 6. But anything that's refrigerated or frozen that we're consuming, that's had to come through a highly complex temperature-controlled environment. And those temperature-controlled environments have to operate 24/7 all the time. So
it's a major quality control. I mean,
it is. And so for me, when I look at that, I think about, the energy that we take to put in there, it's all about, we got to make sure that we can deliver that product, that food, to that end customer. It's got to be safely put there, it's got to be efficiently put there, and it's got to be at the quality that they expect to have. So it does take energy to do that. Not just the energy, the kilowatt energy, the energy of the entire workforce and the entire cold chain to make that happen.
Yes.
When you guys are doing site selection, how much is energy cost a primary consideration?
Well, energy cost goes into it, especially when you're thinking about the capacity constraints that are on the grid right now. But I wouldn't say it's the main driver of it. I mean, we've had operations where we'll put in fuel cells and different ways to generate energy. But the energy costs and prices are going to go up. They've gone up last year around 5% in the U.S. They'll go up another 5% across the board this year and probably another 5% next year. So you can't control that. What you can control is how you are a great steward of that energy, your energy practices. One of the things that I would say is that within the cold chain, we're partnered with a group called Global Cold Chain Alliance, and we share our best practices that we use through energy. And they have a program that's called Energy Excellence, and it's really about how you can be able to be the most efficient in your buildings, operating them from an energy of effectiveness position. We have about 175 of our facilities that are rated and recognized under that program as energy excellence, and we share that across the cold chain for everyone.
Are you guys doing solar on top of the buildings? Is that part of it, or are there other initiatives that you're doing in terms of, you talked about fuel cells being part of the solution. What is the technology that you're most excited about, or innovations as it relates to energy, either production or sustainability, that you think you're super bullish on?
Well, look, I would say you're spot on when you think about solar. Solar is kind of the entry piece. Maybe LED lighting might be the second piece. But if you think about really the future, especially in the cold storage, it's going to be around leveraging technology like AI in your refrigeration systems, being able to get out there on the grid, see the capacity on the grid, predict when you're going to have a demand response or you're going to have peak rates, and be able to pull those temperatures down to be able, in advance, predicting it, pull those down and be able to, when those higher pieces hit, you can coast through.
So it is true, if you lower your temperature, and as you have to pull back on energy so you're managing temperature based on predicting peak load on the grid?
It's a piece of it. We manage, first and foremost, it's about our customer requirements. Our customer requirements have very specific temperature zones that we need to be within. And those can be really, really tight, sometimes within just a couple of degrees, depending on what that product is. All that being said, you have a very huge thermal mass. A cold storage facility is not built like a normal facility. They are very highly engineered. These buildings, you can shut these buildings down, and because of the thermal load that you have in there, it's like a battery, right? So when you want to coast and pull the power down based off of predictability, you could keep those buildings cold sometimes for a week at a time if you had to. Now, you wouldn't want to do that because
so if the grid goes down due to a weather event, the facility itself could sustain that for up to a week?
I could probably, depending on the product, depending on what it is, we could definitely preserve our customers, and we've done that. We've done that through hurricane seasons you had over the last few years, where we had sites in different areas that had massive outages. You know, hospitals and care facilities are going to get it first. And you can't really necessarily go get a generator in there. Even if you have a generator, you're only going to be able to run it for so long with the fuel you have. We can shut those doors down, and there's different ways that we can manage that, and I can keep that temperature for almost as long as until that customer can get their product out of it.
That's fascinating.
How thick are these walls? I mean, what goes into, how do you maintain the thermal inside protect the goods and protect the temperature? Like, what goes into designing that?
It's the insulated metal panels. It's the way that the roof structures are built. You know, the insulation factors in there, and then you have that huge thermal load. So probably it's easier for the audience to think more around, you have an outage at your house, and if you have a freezer, right? If you leave that freezer don't open it, and you're out for an hour, so you have it. You could probably open that up, and your ice and everything is still in there. You start opening it up, you lose that cold sink, and it starts going down. Well, these cold storage facilities are built probably 15 times, 20 times more insulated than that, from the ground all the way to the very top.
Wow.
So to me, that is fascinating, and I hadn't thought that deeply into it. Like, I thought about, cold chain and these storage facilities and how important it is, because you do have the ability to do quality control and to think through temperature management and specialize in that, but I hadn't thought about the peace of mind it would create as well against that risk, right? Because there are going to be exceptions, there are going to be things happening, and for your customers to understand that their product is still safe and that they have time to recover, it has to be huge value.
Well, the risk resiliency is a big piece of what we offer to the customer, because when you have these outages or you have these massive events, the products that are in there, they're going to go out to the goods and the services for the folks that need those products. So we are compelled to protect that product because we know that meat, that vegetable, that frozen or refrigerated product, it's going out into a lot of times the communities in which we operate. And so if we're not able to preserve that, because what happens, right? You have an event, people go out ahead of time, they take care of the stores, they empty the stores out. As soon as the event's over and they're reacting, anything that's left in the stores is gone. We need to replenish that.
We've had a couple of episodes on hurricane season coming up. Amazon has a response unit that we interviewed, as well as the former head of logistics for Home Depot, who's here in Atlanta. And she was we were talking about what the whole hurricane season looks like. And if you know, the whole process of tending to these things is really significant. Anything you guys are doing to prepare for this season, for hurricane season, for weather?
Well, we stay prepared, but when you get closer to the hurricane season, we start really leaning into our risk resiliency programs. And those risk resiliency programs, they're not made during the season. They're made years in advance, and they're continuously updated. And that's where we're really looking at going back and making sure that, do we have the vendors that we need to be able to recover, whether that be from electrical? Has the fire service, have they been out to our facilities lately? Do we have the vendors that we need if we're going to be hooking up generators? Do we have those ready to go? Sometimes you can't get a generator, so we'll be working with some of our partners around getting dry ice to be able to get the dry ice there. But this is a year-round piece, so it's not only that, it's also working with our safety teams, making sure that the sites, there's nothing that can blow around, be breaking the walls, things of that nature. But that's a year-round effort. It's not necessarily just a focus. Now, when you get to the hurricane and you know where it's tracking, now you're starting to really, I'd almost say, funnel in. You've taken this risk resiliency plan you have, and you're focused in on these 4 or 5 sites is where it's going to come, and we'll put a ton of effort into those sites.
But are you lowering the temperature ahead of time?
Sometimes.
So if the hurricane's, a day out, you're like, we've got to drop it by 5 degrees so that we can, that thermal element and that insulation allows you guys to sort of burn off those lower degrees?
We're doing exactly that. So first and foremost, it's about the employees that we have, and then in the community. So first off, we're letting those people have the time they need to go back and prep, and then we're looking at what our customer requirements are, and we do pull the temperatures down, and then we lock that facility up. And when we lock that facility up and shut it down, all that thermal mass is in there. Once that hurricane comes through, we can monitor it. Even if the power goes out, we have different ways that we can monitor it. We can go get back in there and say, okay, this is the temperature. How soon are the roads or whatever is going to recover that potentially our customers might need that product? And that really determines the recovery for that site, of how quickly that site needs to get back up and ready to go.
Now, something we've been talking about, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, is security of warehouses. We've seen what's happened in Russia and Ukraine. It's sort of like just these warehouses that are being attacked by Ukrainian drones. I'm sure you've seen these things on social media, just absolutely astounding. It strikes me that at some point the risks are higher in the United States than they've ever been in terms of asymmetric sort of warfare, terrorist attacks, however you want to describe it, sabotage. How are you guys thinking about security and securing your facilities?
Well, security, it's foremost. I mean, we've got these products that belong out to different customers and have to get to that end user. So they have to be protected regardless of that. So whether that be through cybersecurity that we're looking at, whether that be through fencing security, camera security, badging, getting in and out of those facilities. So we have all those processes in place.
Nothing on the drones yet? Are we still? I've asked this question to a number of folks that have physical warehouses. Not to my knowledge, no one in the United States has yet invested in these, but it's, why would you until this becomes a risk?
I'll tell you what.
I'm not trying to make you a target.
No, I got you. When I hear hooves, I think horses, I don't think zebras. So I'm not expecting a drone attack on my sites right now. So I don't have an iron dome over them, and don't intend to have one until that becomes a need. Now, we do operate in specific areas where I would tell you that you're in closer areas to that, like in Poland, we have sites there. But first and foremost, it's going to be those employee safety. But that's not something that we're looking at this point in time as a drone attack.
Yeah.
But, maybe with your question,
well, I hope that we don't ever have to, but it strikes me that inevitably this is a risk that we all have. I mean, you have these consumer drones that can do the kind of damage that we've seen in the Ukraine and Russia. It's astounding. And it's something we've talked about is these refineries. Diesel prices are going up, the crack spread's up $100 over the oil. That's obviously an issue for folks that are in cold chain. How are you thinking about energy prices this year and what it means beyond electricity? Well, energy prices is different groups that we work with, they're going up, like I said, they're about 5% year over year. In some markets, it's 8%. So the thing you have to really look at is, for us, is how are you going to combat those prices? Because it goes into the rate that our customers have to pay. And you can't always just say, hey, our prices keep going up. So a lot is around using those energy excellence programs where we're investing a lot of time in people. A lot of people think it's AI that's going to get you there. It's somebody walking past something, seeing a door that's open and allowing a heat load to come in there. Just a small door, just a man door that you would walk through open on a 100-degree day outside, and you're trying to keep a dock down to 35. It's going to cost you a ton of energy to do that. Seeing small cracks, if you see some areas where you need to put whether it be some weather stripping, things of that nature, you got to get those. It's just all air leaks, right? It's a lot of it's air leaks. It's getting in front of that. And then the second thing is really investing in the development of people. You need experts to run these systems. And if you get the right folks in these systems that can run them, they can run them extremely efficiently. And then the last piece would be, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is Americo's invested very heavily in refrigeration AI, and that is a difference maker for sure. What exactly is that? Well, it does what I was talking to you about. It's looking at the grid, it's measuring that, but the other thing it does is it goes out and it looks across our facility, right? And it's a great example of one. We have one in a system where we put it in, looked across the facility, and what it noticed is that we had an evaporative unit that was on. Well, the AI kept shutting that evaporator down. Now, my technicians that work in that facility, that was not something they ever saw was that off. So they kept going back and overriding the system and turning it back on. And our controls folks got a hold of me, talked to me. They said, there's something going on. You're not getting the savings you're supposed to get because somebody keeps turning this thing back on. Well, you come to find out, the AI had determined that wasn't giving you the cooling effect that you thought it was. And you actually didn't need it as much. So it would still come on, but instead of coming on in the room like the rest of them would, come on for, say, 20, 30 minutes and then shut off, it might not come on for a period of time. And when it would come on, just come on quickly. That one evaporator in that room, and you're talking about maybe 5 horsepower motors there, that is a huge savings when you're talking about you're cutting that down from maybe 100% of the time that it would run, fractionally down to 5%. It's a big, huge difference. Now, Brian, I know you guys do a lot of food. What percentage of your business is food related? Pretty much just about all of it. All of it. But what about medicine? Is medicine a piece of it? Look, pharmaceuticals is a growing piece that we look at. And we're constantly looking at opportunities, whether that be florals, heavy metals, whether that be anything that can go in a cold chain. But for the most part, everything that we do, for the most part, is food. But we have looked at pharmaceuticals, and we've looked at other products as well. I mean, these peptides, we're big fans, GLP-1s, we talked about it. We weren't so much. What's that? I said we weren't so much the biggest fans of GLP-1s.
It could be less food.
It's a lot less food.
But it's an amazing miracle drug. I mean, yesterday...
flash frozen and refrigerated food. I mean, it should be healthier choices that would be in the cold chain stuff.
I mean, look, I think, but yesterday there was a story that Moderna created basically a cancer.
I saw that. That was interesting.
It's in phase 3 trials, but they've been able to basically cure cancer. I'm going to use that term loosely, but that's what they've done is they take your personal, so basically take a biopsy of the cancer, put it into some type of formula, and then AI goes and creates basically the drug to target it. But it strikes me that these personalized drugs are coming, and a lot of this stuff has to be maintained temperature, and so it just seems like it would be a massive growth sector for the cold chain?
Look, we've had opportunities during COVID. Whenever the vaccine was out, we've had opportunities to be there. We're always in discussions with different manufacturers and different categories that we can bring in, and we have had those discussions. But I got just as many that are UT fans, some Wisconsin fans, some Baylor fans, and so it's just a good melting pot.
And you're an MTSU guy.
Yeah.
We have some folks on staff that are MTSU folks, Colorado State as well.
Yep.
So who do you cheer for? If they were to play, who would you cheer for?
Well, I would probably cheer for MTSU, but I don't. That's what I normally would cheer for.
Yeah, Tennessee, we're all for it. Middle Tennessee State. Well, look, really appreciate you coming in, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys and letting us tell our story about how Americold, how we help our customers feed the world. It's been a great opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in, Brian. We will be right back with some messages. We're going to give you some previews of what we're seeing here in Atlanta at the College Football Hall of Fame. We've taken some video. Our team is here, and we're gonna highlight those right after these messages.
Doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back from Atlanta, Georgia, here at the College Football Hall of Fame. We are live here. It's been a great, I think Atlanta is such a cool city. Not a cool city, it's a hot city.
Yeah.
This building's cool. Americold brought the cold weather.
But yeah, the College Football Hall of Fame, I'm looking forward to doing our tours later, but it has been awesome.
It is amazing. It's such a beautiful, I mean, Atlanta this time of year, it's just, this is the right time, headed to the fall. It's cooled off a bit. The College Football Hall of Fame is, I mean, just an amazing institution. It used to be in South Bend, Indiana, moved to Atlanta, but it started out in New Brunswick, New Jersey, then Ohio, then South Bend, and then Atlanta. Atlanta feels right.
2014 is when it moved here to Atlanta, right?
Yeah, SEC country. It makes sense that it would be down here. It's a beautiful place. It's 95,000 square feet. There's an indoor football turf that you can come play on. It's really cool, but there's helmets.
The helmet
there's a
wall,
massive
when
helmet
you first
wall.
walk in, it's 3 stories. It was very cool to be able to see that many different college teams. I wish they had more Wisconsin merch. They
don't have a lot of Baylor merch either, Julie. It's okay.
I can hear every time the music changes out in the lobby. They are playing Jump Around on repeat, which makes me feel like
that is a legit helmet wall,
which I adore. So that part makes me happy.
You know, we have got to get some guests on here that do the logistics of football.
Yeah.
Like we've done, FreightWaves has done articles about it. Yeah. But I actually think we should go and it'd be cool to do a ride along and see how they actually bring the material in, prepare for the games.
We may have a little something coming for that.
Oh, you're teasing us?
I would like to confirm the guest is booked before I tease it, but I'm thinking that between now and mid-September, we will have someone on who can talk a little bit about dedicated.
Now, rumor has it that we'll be in Green Bay, Wisconsin for the Green Bay Packers game. We'll be broadcasting live from Green Bay. Another great free city.
That is going to be a great.
I know that's going back home to you.
Because I went to high school in Green Bay, and
you're at Green Bay.
It will be a great trip. We've got great guests for that one too. It's going to be a great trip, and it'll be fun to feature Green Bay a little bit.
We're going to be on the road a couple of times in the next couple of weeks. We will be in Austin. We are headed to Green Bay. We'll be in Las Vegas. So we're all over the place here at FreightWaves today. So tune in every day at noon to 2, where we go through the most important conversations and the most important people in the freight and logistics space are brought to you live on FreightWaves TV.